Here's a little brain teaser I like to use with families at baptisms. What do the following people all have in common? Okay, these people. A police officer, a UPS driver, a Walmart cashier, and a New York Yankee. Okay, here they are again. A police officer, a UPS driver, a Walmart cashier, and a New York Yankee. Anybody? What do they have in common? Yes, sir.
Uniform.
They all wear a uniform. Way to go. That's what I like. I like a nice, bold answer. But what does a uniform signify? One, it signifies that there's a certain level of training or knowledge and or skill. And a uniform makes a person instantly identifiable. And it shows that they're part of something bigger, greater than themselves. And I think people really like to have that feeling, that identity, that they're part of something bigger than themselves. It's to the point now at sporting events, I'd say many people, probably these days most people that go to sporting events go dressed in the color of the team they root for. There was a video that made the rounds that went viral last week of Game 1 of the 2005 World Series in Chicago. And the clip showed, it panned the crowd, and it focused in on one fan in the stands wearing his Chicago White Sox jersey. That man was Father Bob Prevost, who is now Pope Leo XIV. How they got that clip is beyond me. Somebody must have gone through the whole thing. But the thing about it is, the first thing I thought of was, I was at that game. I was in the press box. I didn't have a jersey on. I was in the press box. And I'm so grateful and I'm honored in retrospect to have been in the same stadium as him. But of course, from now on, for the rest of his life, Pope Leo will be seen in papal garments. And in his case, those garments signify what's on the inside. They represent a lifetime spent serving God and serving God's people, especially the poor. And that's exactly what Jesus is getting at in the gospel today. He's telling his disciples that everyone will be able to immediately identify them as his followers by how they love each other, not by anything they wear. And that still is true for all of us as followers of Jesus. During a baptism ceremony, especially if it's a baby, we give them a little white bib to put on them. It's very symbolic. But we also say, the priest or the deacon also says, you have clothed yourself in Christ. And that's the rub of it. That's our real identity. Everyone should be able to tell that we are a Catholic Christian by how we are, by how we live. That's our uniform. There's a story, I love this story, about prospectors, gold prospectors, back in California in the 1800s. And a few of them went out and they discovered a trove of gold. But they didn't have enough equipment to get it and to carve it out and to bring it back. So they made a deal with each other. He says, we will come back next week fully prepared with all of our equipment. But don't tell a soul about it. They came back the next week and half the town was with them. They never said a word, but people saw how joyful, how generous, and how kind they all were. And they said, these guys are on to something. And that's how it should be with us, too. People should look at us and say, they have the winning lottery ticket, which we do in Jesus Christ. Back to Pope Leo, even if he and his two brothers didn't look alike, You would know they were related just by the way they act with each other. You know, right after Pope Leo was elected, he tried for 2 hours to call one of his brothers, and he couldn't get through. And when he finally did, and someone had taped this, and when he finally did get through, his first words weren't, "Hallelujah, can you believe this?" or some blessing in Latin. He said what a brother would say to a brother. He said, "Why don't you pick up your phone?" And a few days later, when the Pope was meeting the media for the first time, he's going up and down the aisle, and there was a meet and greet, and they were shaking hands. And a couple people from ABC said, "Yes, Holy Father, we talked to your brothers." And Pope says, "Yeah, those guys are on TV more than I am." But the thing is, I think it's a really credit to their parents that they've had markedly different lives. They've gone different paths, and they're still very, very close. Well, what Jesus is saying in the gospel today is that he has made all of us siblings of each other. You know, regardless of age, race, gender, economic status, we're all brothers and sisters with each other and with him and through him. And we're asked to live that way. In the gospel today, he says, "I give you a new commandment, love one another." Technically, this is not new. In the Old Testament book of Leviticus, there was a commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. But Jesus makes it new, because in the Old Testament, a neighbor was seen as a countryman. With Jesus, your neighbor is everybody. And we're to love everybody like that, which is very new, which is very different, and which is very difficult. Let's face it. People rub us the wrong way. But we're told to love them. And that's hard to do. We have to swallow our pride and swallow our anger, but we have to do it. Besides, anything new is hard. A man I know was looking to sell his house, and his son, maybe like 10, did not think it was a good idea. So every time a realtor came with a prospective buyer, the son came up with all these little signs saying, "Contaminated, you don't want to live here." But he ultimately learned to love his new, bigger house. The new way that Jesus offers today is worth it. It sure flourished for his disciples. Think of it. This gospel is not from a post-resurrection, it's from the Last Supper, just after Judas had left. And just with those 11 guys, and how many times do we hear before, during, and after the conclave that the Pope is the head of 1.4 billion Catholics? It all started with those 11 guys. The point is, when Jesus' new commandment to love one another is really tried, when people really apply it and use it, it's worth it and it works. The second reading today from Revelation explains how it works. It reminds us that with the resurrection, everything is different. Everything is different and better. God is dwelling with his people and always will dwell with his people. God says, "I will wipe all the tears from their eyes," every tear. Pain and death will not last. So there's always hope. There's no purpose for worry or negativity in the Christian faith. I once saw a t-shirt that said, "Pessimism, it'll never work." Something to it. The thing is, the resurrection is not a one-off. It's not a one and done. It's something for us to experience over and over, all the time. It comes in stages. It comes to us in our ups and our downs. It comes in different ways depending on what stage we're at in our faith. we need to really accept it and make it part of our life. We need to radiate it so that people can see Jesus through us. There's another story I like to tell at baptisms, and this one revolves around the comic strip Hi and Lois. And the first frame shows the father, and he's at his desk, and he's saying, ugh, another crummy day, just like 1,000 other days in this job. The next frame is the mother at home, ugh, cleaning this house like I've done hundreds of times, another time cleaning this house. The next frame is their two kids on the bus saying, ugh, another day going to the same old school with the same old lessons and the same old stuff, ugh. And the last frame is a little toddler in a crib going, yippee, another day. There should be at least some of that in all of us. We know that Jesus conquered death, and he says we can too. He loves us, and he needs us to love each other. That ought to affect everything that we do, how we look at the world, how we look at our lives, how we look at others, how we view everything. And there are, I know it's easy to be down, but there are good signs everywhere. Just last week, the Topps company, anyone know the Topps company, what they're known? Yes. What are they known for? Baseball cards. The Topps company, they're famous for making baseball cards. Last week, they issued a card of Pope Leo. Not in his White Sox, but in his papal stuff. It was a record seller. I don't know what burden you might be carrying today, but today is a new day. I've been wearing one of these things for 25 years. This is actually the one that I wore on the day I was ordained, right, Linda? One of my classmates' wives is here. And it wasn't professionally made. Someone from my class had these all made. And one of my classmates had his break during ordination. Mine broke today. But it's a great reminder. Deacon Joe was in the class after us, so we're going to do all this again next year. And I know that, I'm not supposed to say this, and this probably isn't right, but in those 25 years, I know that I've gotten more from the priests and the people than I've given. And toward that end, I will say thank you to Father Ken for acknowledging this day and knowing how important it is to me. And also, I have to say that 28 years ago, I had to go in front of a committee. It's very daunting, going in front of a committee. Just they interviewed you to see if you're worthy to become a deacon. And who was the head of that committee? Sitting right behind me, Father Peter Gary. Blame him. I will say, though, that I can't help but think that once, when I used to work for the Southampton Press, I worked with a woman who was a very salt-of-the-earth woman, Helen Camp. She not only worked there early in the morning, but she was a mom of numerous kids, and she was a good homemaker and a great with hospitality. And at her funeral, the priest said, with Helen, when she was, her apron was as much a sign of holiness as my vestments are. That's the way it's supposed to be. We're supposed to shine with Jesus. Know that if we clothe ourselves with Christ, we can make this a whole new world. Jesus is offering you new life.